This is a 5th generation 4Runner, also known as the RN150 platform. This frame has been very popular amongst Toyota, and it was a new era into what they were starting to develop in the early 2000s. If you scroll over on Instagram, you can see that the 5th generation 4Runner is kind of all over the place. It is basically, when it comes to Toyota 4x4s, you can't go wrong with a 5th generation 4Runner. Now with the 6th generation out, you kind of start wondering if now the 5th is the last of the best 4Runners. But in my opinion, the best 4Runner ever made was the 3rd generation 4Runner.
No.
Obviously I ruffled some feathers with my previous comment, but that does come to a subject that we need to discuss. Which 4Runner is the best 4Runner? Look, dude, I'm sorry, but the 3rd gen is still the best gen. See, that's the thing. We got 6 generations of the Toyota 4Runner now these days. So comment down below and let me know what you think is the best generation, and then I'm gonna argue with you. Now, the Toyota 4Runner was launched in 1984 as a fiberglass back end, bench seat, 4x4, and sporting the 22R engine. And this became really popular, and it was kind of brought into reality as there was a company called Winnebago taking the Toyota Hilux and making the Toyota Trekker. And it turned into what we have today. And that is absolutely awesome. Now, there's some people out there that will say that the 1st generation 4Runner is the true off-roader because it came with a solid axle and they're just highly modifiable. Even this one that's right here behind me is a independent front end, but there's a lot of write-ups and how-tos on how to turn this thing into a solid axle, and there's so much aftermarket for them that basically the sky is the limit. I don't know about this one though. And here at Tandem Off-Road, we work on a ton of Toyota 4x4s, but our resident tech here who loves 1st generation probably could tell us why he thinks the 1st generation is the best generation.
So my favorite part about it is the top comes off. So during the summer, pull that off, you can get into the back seat a lot easier. The 1st generation trucks also had a fully boxed frame all the way out the back, leaf springs in the rear, 17-gallon gas tank so you can get all the way to the gas station. And I mean, they're just bulletproof, you know, except for the later one. You can get a later one with the 3-liter in it that's not quite as good as the 22 RE.
Okay, how many 1st gen 4Runners do you own?
Currently?
Yeah.
3.
3. How many have you owned?
Probably 6 or 7 of them.
7 of them. So this guy knows a little thing or two about 1st generation 4Runners. Now, is this really the 1st gen, the best gen?
I would say so.
You would say so. You die on that hill?
Yeah, I'll die on that hill. Somebody's gonna die on that hill.
Cut it right there. I thought you said these things were reliable.
I guess not this one. Well, and it sits for, you know, probably 15, 20 years, and you hit a bump, and then the coil wire falls off. Oh. That makes sense why it didn't want to start. Jesus. Yeah, the coil wire is a piece of crap. That's what's wrong with it. I gotta push that thing out some. There it is. Yeah, I'll probably run now. Yeah, I just hit the bump and it just died. Like,
Now, I do have to absolutely agree that the 1st generation 4Runner is absolutely iconic, but then when the 2nd generation came out, it was quite a bit of an upgrade because it went from 2-door to 4-door. It became a whole actual body. And right here is my 2nd generation 4Runner. Actually, I don't have a 2nd generation 4Runner. The majority of them are actually in the junkyard. So now my favorite, and my personal choice when it comes to the 4Runner, and the only solution I would ever say when it comes to owning a 4Runner, is the 3rd generation Toyota 4Runner. Debuting in 1995 and released to the public in 1996, that's when this legend was absolutely born. It came with 2 basically engines that you could get for it, and at least in the 4x4 variant, which was the 3RZ 2.7 liter 4-cylinder engine, and automatic or standard, and the 5EZ, the legend that actually completely overshadowed the 3RZ was the 5EZ, is the 3.4 V6 engine that is just known to go the distance. Now, why do I think the 3rd generation is the best? Well, in my perspective, when it comes to off-roading and all that stuff, it's the perfect size. It has an outstanding frame to ground clearance, and it's just extremely capable. For example, actually, we need to get Chris over here because he drives a 4Runner and has taken it everywhere Old Blue has been, and then some. He never falls behind, and it's always behind us. But why exactly is the 3rd generation my favorite Toyota 4Runner? And a lot of people ask me this all the time as to how did I get into Toyotas? Well, see, I started lost in my own ways. My first 4x4 rig was a 1984 Jeep Grand Wagoneer, and I loved that thing to death. My brother went the other way. He purchased a used 1997 4Runner with 350,000 miles. Granted, my Wagoneer had an astounding 120,000 miles on it, and we started going wheeling. We took this thing to Bridgeport OHV Park and all that stuff, and I spent 90% of my time working on my Jeep, trying to get it going, and my brother had this clapped out 1997 4Runner with 350,000 miles, and it just kept going. And it did everything. And it did it with smaller tires. It did it just fine. And on top of that, we ended up selling that 4Runner, and it continued to go for another 150,000 miles. So they just are very, very reliable if you stay on top of them. On top of that, because of their shorter wheelbase, their high frame to ground clearance, you don't have to go absolutely crazy with them. You can actually run 31s on these and do some pretty outstanding things out in the trails. And Chris is a living proof for that, because that's what exactly he does every single time. In 2003, Toyota went a little crazy. They redesigned the whole thing. Actually, they redesigned almost the entire platforms in their 4x4 market or in their truck market. They came out with the RN 120 platform frame design, which was accepted in the 4th generation 4Runner, which came with a 4.7 liter V8, also known as the 2UZ-FE, the million-mile motor. This, in some people's eyes, is the best 4Runner ever made, but in my opinion, I kind of tend to sway, and you might disagree on me on this, and that's okay. That being said, that when you go up in tire size and you combine the torque of the V8, the 8-inch kind of would succumb to the abuse and would fail. And of course now you can get upgrades for them, but it still didn't, address the fact that it's still a pretty glaring issue. And Toyota actually did a really good job with it, because it kept a lot of the styling that you'd see in the 3rd generation and the 2nd generation 4Runner, and it had that iconic look. But in my opinion, it's really boring. And actually, my biggest issue with the 4th gen 4Runner is that it's kind of plain in the interior, exterior department, and it is really weird because at the same time, it's an extremely dependable, approachable platform. I mean, it's by far, in terms of reliability, this is almost as good as you can get. Now we're to this point right now. The longest running generation of Toyota 4Runners is the 5th generation 4Runner. Introduced in 2010, came with a 4-liter V6, the 1GR-FE. Literally had a lifespan of almost 14 years. I don't know, my math might not be right, but I think it's like 14 years in production before it was overtaken by the 6th generation 4Runner, which we'll get to here in a minute. The reason that this has stayed in production for so long was probably the most refined out of the 4x4 lineup that Toyota has ever released here in the United States. And that made it not only dependable, but it also gave it a large market, or a large availability in the off-road market, as in parts and lift kits and just modifications that you can do. You can spend 15 minutes on Instagram and you'll know what I'm talking about. This thing was everywhere, and it was a staple for overlanders all around the United States that are in the Toyota enthusiasts. If you want to get into it, a 4Runner would be your first thing you would think of. And before I get even into more details, here's an awkward statement from my brother on the 5th generation 4Runner.
It's like the 2025 Civic. Everybody has one. Back in the 2000s, everybody had a Civic. Now everybody has a 5th gen 4Runner. White. And they all call them Stormtroopers. Just kidding, I'm just kidding. It's a good truck. It's a good truck. They're reliable, they're solid, really capable, they're amazing. They're just incredibly popular.
That's true. You can only say that because it's a good product.
It's a great product.
It was one of Toyota's longest selling. Oh, it is. I already said that like 10 times.
Super popular. It got more popular as the time went on.
Yeah, that's true.
It was so popular. It was ridiculous.
Extremely popular.
It's amazing. It's a great product.
Absolutely.
Stormtrooper.
And it wasn't really that perfect because it still had brake dive issues right out of the box. The brakes were seeming kind of actually weak. There was wheel vibration issues. There's torque converter shutter issues. There's the needle bearing at the differential in the front. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on. People complained about how it was kind of underpowered, that it was really poor on gas mileage, and people, in my opinion, were looking at the 4Runner kind of all wrong when it came to those things, because it's always been Toyota's MO to underpower, overgear, and do all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you still can't fault it. There's a reason why this vehicle was so popular for so long, and why, even though when it came out it had some controversy on it because it was a new platform, and that it was going to hold up to the 4th generation, the 3rd generation, which were very beloved overall. And this allows us to segue over to the 6th generation. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't have a lot of money and I can't get one over here, and they're still brand new, and there's not a lot of them here for us to look at, which that kind of says that the 6th generation, only time will tell. Is the 4-cylinder turbocharged hybrid system going to hold up? Is it going to be as off-road capable as its older brothers that have set the foundation for them to have over these past many years? I don't know, but it looks good. I'll give it that. Let me know which Toyota 4Runner you think is the best Toyota 4Runner. What generation do you think is the best one ever made by Toyota? Other than that, I think that's it. That's it for this video. I got nothing else for you. So, bye-bye.